On behalf of Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I would like to extend a warm welcome to one and all to our 187th Foundation Day. May I now invite our dignitaries on the dais, please. Beginning with our chief guest, Mr. Uday, Kotak, MD and CEO of Kotak Mahindra Bank.
Our guest of honor, Dr. Sandeep Shastri, Vice Chancellor of Jagran Lakecity University, Bhopal. Our President, Mr. Nilesh Shah, Group President and Managing Director of Kotak Mahindra AMC. And our Senior Vice President, Mr. Ritesh Tiwari, CFO, Hindustan Unilever Limited and Unilever South Asia. May I now request Mr. Nilesh Shah, President, Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to please deliver the welcome address.
Our chief guest, Mr. Uday Kotak, our guest of honor, Dr. Sandeep Shastri, Mr. Ritesh Tiwari, Senior Vice President, Bombay Chamber of Commerce, and Mr. Krishna Mohan Narayan, Vice President, Bombay Chamber. Board members, past presidents, ladies and gentlemen. A very special thanks to our chief guest, Uday, and our guest of honor, Dr. Shastri, for gracing this occasion. It is an honor to be here today and welcome each of you to 187th Foundation Day of the Bombay Chamber of Commerce and Industry. The Chamber formally came into existence on 22nd September 1836, full 187 years before. And today is a day to relive the spirit of its formation, of promoting trade, commerce, and business, promoting public service through public-private partnership. On this day, we salute that spirit embodied in John Skinner, the first chairman, and his committee of 10 distinguished members, and the spirit of all successive eminent presidents who led the Chamber's activities and helped it reach to today's position. We feel privileged today to have amongst us some of the past presidents, Ms. Anjali Bansal, Sudhir Bhai, Mr. Sunil Mathur, Mr. P.R. Ramesh, Dr. Joshipura, Mr. Uday Khanna, Mr. Bharat Doshi, Mr. Pradeep Malik, Mr. S.M. Datta, and Mr. M.H. Modi. I am sure that your continuous guidance and support will always be with us. Over the last many decades, the Chamber has played a vital role in the development of Mumbai as a city, including facilitating the setting up of the railways, the Bombay Port Trust, and its continuous contribution towards creating an environment conducive to trade and industry in Mumbai and India. I feel a sense of pride and humility to be part of this long and illustrious history of the Chamber. A deep understanding of responsibility to ensure that we retain our status as one of the leading chambers and build upon its reputation as one of the thought leaders and change agents in the domain of commerce and industry. Obviously, this task requires support, good wishes, and contribution from all of you. Continuing the theme of corporate for change, we remain focused on promoting sustainable, social, economic, financial, and environmental initiatives. The 4 key elements for this are sustainable change, ease of doing business, diversity and inclusion, and Mumbai 4.0. Some of the main events that we have conducted over the past few months are: 1, as a chamber, we have organized multiple panel discussions, webinars, and seminars that have addressed contemporary issues faced by our members, from volatility in currency market to debt market development, from new CSR regime to related party transaction issues. We have gathered eminent voices to guide our members. The 13th Biennial AgriCorp Conference and Buyer-Seller Meet 2022 on October 11th and 12th, organized by the Bombay Chamber, jointly with Kisan Forum, was a pioneering step towards bringing FPOs, organized retailers, startups, fintech companies, and state and central government organizations together. The two-day AgriCorp 22 saw eminent speakers from across the agriculture spectrum and other stakeholders providing their valuable insights. As usual, the Chamber has prepared and submitted to the Honorable Finance Minister and other government officials the pre-budget memorandum for FY24. Our recommendations will help the government identify emerging issues that need to be tackled by taking suitable measures. We are taking our diversity, equity, and inclusion mandate forward by conducting a series of mentoring programs for women professionals, beginning with the Mentoring for Enrichment 2023 program. This will begin in next month, and for up to 6 months, each mentor will set aside 1 hour per mentee, during which the mentors will enlighten the mentees with their experiences and learnings throughout their working journey. I'm thankful to all the members who have agreed to participate in this program. The Chamber signed an MOU with the Society for Mumbai Incubation Lab to Entrepreneurship, SMILE, an initiative of the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai for cooperation to support civic tech startups. This collaboration will facilitate a platform for budding civic tech entrepreneurs to convert ideas into viable business propositions, maximizing the welfare of society with a focus on the city of Mumbai. Through its flagship Shadow the Leader program, Season 6, organized by the Young Bombay Forum, a youth wing and a think tank of young leaders, the Chamber has been providing young and aspiring leaders the chance to spend a day with their mentor and learn about what drives their success. In the future, we hope to organize many more such events and continue playing a significant role in development of trade, commerce, and industries in the city of Mumbai. A business chamber is as good as the member it represents. More the merrier is truly applicable here. The Chamber has launched a drive to double its membership. We are aiming to do in next 1 year what we have done in last 187 years. No doubt it's a daunting task, but I'm sure if each one of us bring at least one new member, this is quite easily doable. I'm looking forward to your support of introducing at least one new member through Each One Bring One, which will help double our membership. I know that all of you are eagerly waiting to hear our chief guest. I invite our Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Uday Kotak, to address our members. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilesh, Ritesh Tiwari, Sandeep, Shastri, and many, many known, familiar, and respected faces in the audience. Friends, I have had the privilege of coming and speaking at the Bombay Chamber a few times earlier, and it's always been a pleasure, other than the ride, particularly from Bandra Kurla, all the way to Cuff Parade. Other than that, I think it's always a pleasure to be here. And I suppose President Hotel seems to be the favorite place for Bombay Chamber. And maybe 187 years ago, when you started this chamber, it may have been in the same hotel. But Nilesh, the point which you made in the beginning of your, during your talk about wanting to do in 1 year what Bombay Chamber has done in 187 years in terms of membership, is the kind of stuff which today's world really needs to be able to think, including India and Mumbai, out of the box. What do we do to change destiny? And how do we really get to a completely different paradigm from where we are? And I think it's very important that such discussions happen in the city of Mumbai, which has been the harbinger of change for many, many things in this country. And I today, based on the discussions we had, I'm going to be speaking about, in this context, the role of India in this emerging world order as we see it today, and how do we, as a nation, as a people, as Indians, redesign and redefine ourselves for this new world order which we are getting into. And such debate in Mumbai, at Bombay Chamber, should be the beginning of us thinking dramatically and profoundly. Friends, I go back to early March 2020. It seems like at least one generation earlier, because it was pre-COVID. And I remember very vividly there was a dinner in Delhi at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And the President of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump, was in India. And we were all gathered there, had an opportunity to shake hands with him and the First Lady, and then a very grand dinner. And just around that time, COVID was beginning to take shape. And I think within days of him going back, he promptly defined February, March 2021. Most of us felt that this is going to be doomsday for India, and oil is going to go to $150 and $200, which is a big Achilles heel for India. But we navigated very well. We did not lose our cool. We actually positioned ourselves extremely well between the Western world, essentially led by US and Europe, versus Russia, and our positioning vis-a-vis China to really find that middle path with Russia, using the narrative that we have dependence on them for our defense, but more strategically saying India will do what is right for its own self-interest. It will not be driven by a narrative, whether it comes from the US or Europe or anywhere else. We will do what is right for us and in our interest. And that is a very, very important position India took and stuck to it. And for a variety of reasons, the US as well as Europe not only acknowledged and accepted our position, but we actually came out stronger in terms of where India stands in this geopolitical order. And we also wonderfully positioned ourselves vis-a-vis China, and in Putin's mind, as a friend who is not going against me, not necessarily with Putin in a sort of a negative sort of way, but Putin probably needed China, but welcomed the fact that India abstained. It did not take a position against him, neither did we take a position against what was the requirement of the US and Europe. And that has actually brought a lot of stature to India's relative positioning in this world. To an extent where people say that if there's any solution which needs to be found on this Russia-Ukraine issue, India could potentially be one of the mediators of finding solutions for this. So that, I think, we have to credit the current dispensation, of course, Prime Minister Modi, but we are all also very delighted with the way our Foreign Minister or External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, has actually handled and positioned India in this relative world order. Therefore, compared to the size of what India is, compared to the size of India versus a China or a US, India is pulling its weight in terms of relative stature, much above what we probably deserve in terms of the size of our GDP. And even there, the fact that we are now the 5th largest economy and are able to ensure that positioning despite the fact that we have a lot of challenges on per capita. A 3.3 trillion economy divided by 68 million denominator, which is what UK is, versus a 3.3 trillion economy divided by 1.4 billion people, gives a little different outcome on per capita, which is $47,000 per capita in the case of the UK versus only $2,500 per capita in the case of India. We have positioned ourselves well. But it is here that I wanted to pause and actually say that one is to position ourselves and really have the right narrative and really get a disproportionate mind share of the global political and business class. The second is for us to internalize and improve on what is our reality. And this is something which I would like us as India not to be necessarily carried away by our narrative, but by seeing how we can get better on some of these basics. And at $2,500 per capita, we run a lot behind what would be defined even as a middle income country. And $2,500 per capita is 16,000 rupees a month of income of an average Indian. And that's a long way away from where we need to be getting comfortable. And therefore, the economics of this country finally has to boil down with, of course, absolute GDP, but also very significantly moving at least to the middle income level. Forget becoming a rich country, at least in most of our lives. And if you take a middle income level, India needs to be 3 to 4 times per capita. And I would say a middle income country would be $8,000 to $10,000 per capita from the current $2,500 per capita, which India is. And there are wonderful arguments around purchasing power parity and all that. But if we want to be considered as a 5th largest economy in terms of GDP, we are talking about GDP, not in PPP terms, but GDP, then let's talk about per capita also, not in PPP terms, but in just terms of GDP per capita GDP. And we need to figure out how, while we project ourselves and punch along, we dramatically improve the reality of this country. So that is the challenge in front of us. And business, we are dealing with how do we get to a $10,000 per capita. And for $10,000 per capita, India needs to be at least a 12 trillion economy. And that seems to be some way off. Moving further in terms of the things which I think we have done very well is provided a very stable base for the country in terms of the political stability and also some of the areas of new paradigm shifts in law, in terms of the IBC, in terms of many other reforms which have happened in this country, like PLI, to encourage manufacturing. So many things have happened which have actually improved our position. But there are some things we have work to do. And what I would like us to really focus on, this is again a business chamber, of some of the macro realities we need to address head on. And the two ones which are important for any of us in business, and I'll just put forward a question. If I told any of the people running businesses, including the CFO of Hindustan Unilever, that we are a very promising country, investors love to invest in India all the time, and we are continuing to give great opportunity and promise. But our profit and loss account will always be negative. And what do I mean by this? What do I mean by this in simple language is current account. And on current account, India continues to have a significant current account deficit even this year. And I look at a current account of a country as a profit and loss account of our country. And we are $120 billion minus this year. We are well cushioned. We have got a $500 $50 billion of foreign exchange reserves, but we continue to have a P&L deficit, which is about $120 billion a year. And you mentioned about getting different stakeholders together. How does India improve its competitiveness? If you've got a $10 billion a month of deficit of current account and a trade deficit which is about $26 billion a month, how do we improve efficiency of our business to a point where we are able to make our ends meet between exports of goods and services and remittances versus imports? And how will we ever bridge this gap in a sustainable manner? And this is about competitiveness. We have a great domestic market with 1.4 billion people. So we are producing goods and services for Indians. How do we make that competitive for the rest of the world? And we still don't seem to have got a sustainable answer for this. And we very often say our excessive dependence on oil. Yeah, but that's something which many countries like Japan completely imported oil for all these years, but had run huge trade surpluses and had one of the largest reserves for a very long period of time. Therefore, what does it take for Indian business? And very often we'd like to be wanting policymakers to do things for us. But how is Indian business going to be competitive? Or are we too comfortable with the large domestic market which buys our goods and services, and therefore we are not focusing on being competitive enough vis-a-vis the rest of the world? And this is one area where I think true Atmanirbharta for a country is when we make our ends meet. And we don't depend on foreign investment. We welcome foreign investment on our terms. Today, we need to depend on foreign investment because we have got to fill that gap of $120 billion a year. So this is something which, when I look at India's relative position, I would love to see a time when Bombay Chamber celebrates 200th? You're 187, no? 187. So at 200 years of Bombay Chamber, why don't we say that we will be truly Atmanirbhar and we will make our P&L account, which is our current account, at least neutral? That's the kind of goal we need to put ourselves forward. And I'm not saying it cannot be government alone. It is us as business and trade, services, manufacturing. This is our opportunity on manufacturing. China is under pressure. More major strategic players around the world want a diversification. There is a huge concentration risk of having all the factories and facilities out of China. And Apple, the Foxconn plant, you just saw it on television all the way, is having unrest in China. I know Apple has decided to have a plant in India. This is a time for us to leap and get the world's manufacturing in India. India may have missed the bus over the last 20 years, but this is the time of change. There is disruption in the world. And India is an acceptable, stable nation. India's manufacturing, which is in the teens in terms of a percentage of our GDP. And what better place than Bombay Chamber to take a lead on manufacturing, to grow India's manufacturing competitively, make in India not only for India, but for the rest of the world as well. And this is a turning point I genuinely believe India must embrace. Then, of course, beyond that, we have the other big area which we need to figure out, which is again another P&L account, which is India's fiscal deficit. And India did well. We did not expand or spend disproportionate money in the last 2 years, as many other countries did in the COVID era, and we kept ourselves reasonably in check in terms of spend. But despite that, if I take the center plus state fiscal deficit, we are still at around 10% of GDP, which is an extremely large number. So how are we going to make sure that our revenues and expenditures, which is the other aspect of the other P&L, get better, and how are we going to keep on consolidating? Again, the argument is for growth, we need to keep on having a deficit, and that deficit has to remain. And frankly, there's only one country in the world who has that privilege to have a large current account deficit and a large fiscal deficit. And that is the United States of America, because it has the privilege of a reserve currency, which no other country on the planet has. And my view is no other country on this planet will have it for a long, long time. And this thing about gold, crypto, China, I don't think it's going to work. It is going to be the US dollar, because the competitor to the US dollar is a currency which has no owner, the euro. Who is the owner of the euro? Different states, different countries, different governments getting together with very diverse views, south of Europe versus the rest of Europe. It is not a competition. It almost sounds like Indian politics. So we have to really keep in mind that you don't have a competitor to the US dollar. And what US can do in terms of current account and the budget deficit. I see a similar situation with reference to us. Therefore, if India wants to become a great nation, we need to fix the fisc and the current account. And it cannot happen over time, but it has to be a very determined effort to get there. And for that, I think governance is going to be the key part. I mean, the issue today, I don't think is the governance at the center. It's about the states. And I can share with you some of the challenges which we face in the states, including for a brief while in my role as ILNFS chair. It is a very, very challenging thing to deal with state governments. And the governance at some of the state governments is really, really non-existent. So how can we build a country when the governance mechanism at the states, which is a key part of the federal structure, not keeping pace? Therefore, we really need to figure out a way to be fixing that. And then I have another very provocative point about what will it take for our nation to be great in the emerging world order. And essentially, it's about two categories of people who can transform a nation. And I think a country can become world-class when the best of minds want to become teachers and judges. Society's brightest want to become teachers. And the brightest lawyers, instead of making disproportionately large legal fees, say, we want to serve the nation by becoming judges. And at this point of time, let us ask any and every one of us, how many of the really talented people of this country would say, I want to move away from a flourishing profession. I'm glad to know you are chairing a university in Bhopal, and therefore I relate to the fact that we really need world-class people to take up the teaching profession. And it is really what we must change the dynamic. And the second is judges. And I'm really glad to see Chief Justice Chandrachud. Actually, he had a flourishing practice and decided to become a judge long time ago. But we needed much wider, deeper, for truly creating an outstanding society of Indians. And let's think about how we can really build this as the foundation of India. So this is something which was a softer aspect of what I think will change this nation. And beyond that, I continue to be very optimistic about India's future. And I think we really have a way of moving forward despite all obstacles which come our way. And I will share once again something which I genuinely believe, that whenever you look at India as a photograph, India looks very challenging. This is wrong, that is wrong. 100 things need to be fixed. But I'm a great fan of Bollywood movies. The Indian movie chugs along. And like a Bollywood movie, despite being a very bad photograph at a point of time, the Indian Bollywood movie normally has a happy ending. So with that, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and delighted to be here with you.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening talk on how India is emerging in world. Now the floor is open for question and answer. And may I request Mr. Tiwari to please moderate the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an amazing talk, sir. So simply spoken. And from audience, let me know the questions that you have. You can just pass on to me. And probably as you pass on the question, let me start with a few of mine, sir. I think both topics, to a lot of finance people, the current account and the fiscal account, I think a very clear, I would say, set of study for us today, the way you spoke. As you had also recently spoken in another event of Reuters that it's now time for India to invest, and you give a pretty loud shout to invest. Just wanted to capture some of your thoughts on that as well.
See, the issue really is that when turning points come, you've got to get to scale at speed. And China did it. And if this is India's moment, which is what I mentioned, we really need to get to scale at speed. And I think business is, at this point of time, still cautious on investing. It is more circumspect, still uncertainty, COVID, Russia, Ukraine, interest rates, kya hoga. I think the time has come for us to say that we've got a lot of things right. The country, a lot of the corporate sector is deleveraged. The outcomes of COVID were nowhere as bad as what we thought early in 2020. And this is a time to now literally play some bold shots. Okay? And corporate India must get out of its shyness and get the animal spirits back. And there is the policy environment which is supportive. We really need to break through. We really need to unclutter ourselves and say that we can take some calls. And I'm looking at broader business and a lot of the broader business in India. And when I'm saying big business, it just does not mean 1 or 2 or 3 groups. I'm looking at broader business in India. We really need to get them bolder. And that's what a chamber of commerce like Bombay Chamber can do. To go out and take the calls of now some risk and invest. We have a stable government. India has come out reasonably well. The world is not in a great place. How do you shine out? You shine out when the going is tough. When the going gets tough, the tough must get going. And that's what I mean by really going forward.
Yeah, many thanks. The second thing which comes to mind, there are 2 large trends, digital and ESG. We know that these 2 trends is what probably will define the next generations of business success. India has taken many steps on being a digital economy. UPI is a success which many countries today want to emulate. ONDC is an initiative at scale which is now giving a birth, and I'm hoping next 3 to 5 years' time we scale up. What are your views of India as an economy to play a role of digital ecosystem for the world?
I think we are very lucky that we have a huge opportunity of leapfrog. And what we have done on digital, whether it's UPI or ONDC, Anjali is of course involved with that. So I think we have an opportunity to continue to leapfrog. And we are not having any baggage. It's like saying that when we moved to the mobile telephony, our choice was a landline with many years of waiting period. So the shift was easy. We really need to take this call that the digital economy is going to make it the cost to serve is going to be dramatically lower. And it's going to make a lot of our inefficiencies, which are the problems of our current account, capital account, fiscal deficit, can actually get solved by getting bolder on the digital economy, because absolute straight through processing will significantly remove the costs. But the conundrum which I think India is facing is something which was once said, everything you say about India, the opposite is equally true. And while we are talking about the digital economy, why is it that the cash economy is still so large? A digital economy should have reduced the cash economy. But we know currency in circulation, other than for a brief period in October, is been continuously increasing as a percentage of GDP. So I am actually wondering, how do you make sure that a digital economy is consistent with a less cash economy? And that's the answer I don't have. Maybe somebody in business will have an answer to that. Unless there are really two parallel economies going on and continuing to flourish, one is with GST, other is without GST. So I wonder what is happening.
And the questions in the room, please. Yeah, Mr. Khanna.
Good evening. I'm Pramod Shah, practicing Company Secretary and former Chairman of the Institute of Company Secretary of India. These are the few observations I would request Mr. Uday to give. One is, sir, you have given a very nice rosy picture of the Indian economy, which we appreciate. But, sir, don't you think there are three important deterrents for the expansion of the economy? One is, sir, internal conflicts between the political parties. Number two, sir, frequent changes in the law and the piling of cases at various courts. And number third is non-ethical practices followed by few industrialists, sir. Your comments on that, sir. Thank you.
You know, I think in any democratic economy, there will always be a very significant amount of differences of views. And I think as long as you have a reasonable rule of law, therefore if there's any unethical practices, I think the rule of law should take care of it. And as far as differences between political parties are, that's because you have different political parties, they have to have differences, otherwise how will we have a political system? So that's my answer on that.
Thank you. Mr. Khanna, you had a question? Can somebody please pass on mic?
Sorry, Uday, you rightly highlighted the need for Indian industry to become competitive and more productive, which is globally competitive, and given that we've had 70 years. But there is still a reluctance by Indian industry generally to follow that rule, as evidenced by the clamor for import duties, inability to join the trade pacts which the region is doing, and lastly, inability to capture the clothing industry in China, which Vietnam seems to have done better than us. Would you like some views on why this is happening, despite everybody saying that this should happen? We don't seem to be catching, and as you said, there are conflicting views, but from your vantage point and CIA and all, what's holding us back?
You know, one of the things is our advantage at times should not become our disadvantage. Our advantage is a large domestic market, okay? Therefore, when Indian business and industry has such a captive audience to which it can sell relatively easily, and why go out and face the heat of a truly competitive world? I think that's one. Two, I think we are not geared with a sense of paranoia. There is a sense, and I'm going back to philosophy, in India, you know, we tend to accept and tolerate things. We are not paranoid or what I call as out there to break the status quo. And I use this phrase in our firm, and Mr. Khanna, you're aware of that there are three gods, Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. You need a Vishnu for preservation. We need a lot more Brahma and Mahesh for transformation of a company or a country. And we have a lot of Vishnu, especially with a 1.4 billion market, and also an industry structure which was, I should not use the word of Bombay Club at Bombay Chamber, But in the post-reform world, that's how it started. It was about how do we protect territory. And we also have a truly competitive market would see an ability of a global firm or a domestic firm to play on the same level playing field. But that has got a little complicated by today's world. In many areas, countries would want to have national leaders and national corporations versus multinational corporations necessarily taking over critical areas. And this is back to, I mean, you look at Japan or even look at China, the difficulty for a non-local player to really make it big is always difficult. And this is the kind of world we are getting into, where security, defense, strategic interests begin to override the broader competitive marketplace. And India runs the risk of having some of that come in, where then you say that I need to support some large national winners because they can also take care of strategic importance areas for the country. Now, this is an area which I think is, again, a difficult area to navigate. And you run the risk of getting less competitive. And when we get less competitive, I think ultimately the question is for true success of a country, we must be able to earn more than we spend. And how do you manage these different conflicting areas to take India forward? And there is, every country has lobbies, but in India, a few people in a few lobbies will always have a larger voice than the broader consumers. And it's like a similar battle between the farmer and the consumer. And the farmer is a bigger vote lobby. The consumer is also an anti-inflation lobby. So you struggle in this country between these two forces. So you'll suddenly find exports of some food items stopped, some other commodities stopped because of, like wheat, when India could export, because you've got domestic pressures of a large country. So we have our own pulls and pressures, which keep on holding us back. And the tough call of making a country competitive is not an easy call, but it has to be a sustained call. And I think India is some ways away from truly becoming a world-class competitive nation. And true success, I think, is very difficult for our country if we are not truly Atmanirbhar in terms of our P&L.
Thank you. Was there a question at the back there? Yeah. Just give the mic, please.
Yeah. So my name is Ajay Bodke. I think for India to emerge, as a strong player in manufacturing sector, there's a lack of consensus politically in pursuing factor reforms in land and labor. Not for being tried by the central government, but I think somewhere they have not been able to evolve this consensus. The second factor is the regressive pursuit of policies by various political parties across the ideological spectrum in key sectors like electricity distribution and agriculture, where again that's holding back. So what is it that the center and the states need to do to tide over these differences that they have in these key issues? And lastly, the emerging fissures in smooth relationship between the center and the state in terms of the economic. We talk about cooperative federalism, comparative federalism, but somewhere there is these growing voices that you need to do more for smoothing the relationship between the two. So if you could just give your thoughts on these issues, sir.
Very tough ones, and I'm very conscious that Mr. Shastri, we all want to hear Mr. Shastri as well, so I'll take this as probably amongst the last questions. See, I think, we have one of the most stable central governments we've had for quite some time. Despite that, and most industry chambers welcome the farm law, but the Indian system still rejected it. And the weight of the political pressure which came for a government well entrenched in power shows that India is a country where evolution is the way. And anything which is perceived as even remotely revolutionary will get thwarted pretty quickly. And therefore, even if you want to make your progress in many areas, or a government wants to get a control over a system, it happens gradually over time and not at one shot. So I believe that India will have to progress in an evolutionary manner, and it will always be 2 steps forward with 1 step back. That's the nature of our polity and the nature of the diversity of this country. And what we need to keep on pushing is evolution continues to happen. That's what I would say. And that's an answer which will also reflect in center state. But I worry about states because it is about quality of leadership which worries me more in the center-state relationship, because we are seeing very significant deterioration in governance in many, many states in the country. So issue is much more at the states, not necessarily at the center.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kotak, both for your talk and also giving lots of other inputs for your answers. MC, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kotak and Mr. Tiwari. Before I invite our guest of honor, Dr. Sandeep Shastri, to deliver the address, I would like to take the privilege of saying few words about him. Dr. Sandeep Shastri, current Vice Chancellor of Jagran Lakecity University, Bhopal, brings with him close to 4 decades of experience in the fields of research and teaching. Dr. Shastri is a political scientist who has been the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Jain University for over a decade, Director of Research and Training Wing of the Jain Group of Institutions for 5 years, and faculty in the Department of Political Science and at Bangalore University for 2 decades. Dr. Shastri has authored over 13 books, more than 50 chapters in edited books, and more than 100 articles in reputed research journals. His research has focused on electoral studies, federalism, political processes and institutions, and the teaching-learning process. Dr. Shastri is also co-chair of the research committee of the International Political Science Association that focuses on public opinion research, and national coordinator of the Lakecity network, an all-India network of social scientists involved in survey-based election and opinion studies. Dr. Shastri has also lectured at universities in over 50 countries. He has been a Southford Foundation Fellow, Salzburg Seminar Fellow, Indo-Canadian Fellow, and the International Visitor Program Fellow. As the chairman of the drafting committee, he played a key role in drafting Karnataka's youth policy. I now request our guest of honor, Dr. Sandeep Shastri, to kindly address the gathering on 2024 Lok Sabha poll. What does the political crystal ball say 18 months before the poll?
Respected Uday Kotak ji, my friend Nilesh ji, respected Vikas ji, other distinguished members in this very, very special audience, and friends. It's indeed a very, very special honor for me to be here this evening. And I would assign multiple reasons as to why I consider it a special honor. When Nilesh ji told me that this program was there, and when I read that Uday ji will be the first speaker, I thought it would be a special honor to hear him and then follow him. Follow him, I don't know how much I can. Hear him, I very much did. And I thought that honor is something I would not like to miss an opportunity that I got. Secondly, Mumbai has been always very close to me. My maternal grandfather ran away from Bangalore at the age of 10 and came to Mumbai and established the first surgical company called the Bombay Surgical Company. His name was Kudupi Bhujangrao, and he was a member of your association. And I was very young when he passed away, but I still remember him talking of business. And therefore, when I got this chance to be among all of you, I thought I would be doing a small role in honoring his memory, because he was somebody in the 70s who was active, 60s who was active in this club. Thirdly, I think as Udayji said, as somebody from the teaching learning profession, you always look for opportunities to learn. And hearing him was one of those opportunities to learn. In the last 40 years, more than 30,000 students have allowed me to learn with them in their classroom. I don't think I have taught anybody. I don't have that ego that I taught anybody, but they taught me a lot. And today also, listening to Udayji, I learnt a lot. I also must say that today, in this audience, I feel very special because there are 3 people in this audience who have been part of my life journey. There is in this audience one of India's greatest weave masters who worked for Mafatlal and even at 90 is still active. Somebody who has seen me grown up from my childhood, I would like to recognize his presence, Mr. Shyam Masters, who is with us here. Shyam Mama, if we could just stand up for my sake, please. Thank you. And as Udayji said, teaching is the world of tomorrow and of today. One of the most brilliant professors of English, his wife, Sheila Masters ma'am. Both of them have been part of my growing up journey, and they are the ones who gave me the confidence whenever an opportunity came to take up a new assignment, new responsibility, they helped me. And also I must recognize somebody who introduced me to the business world of Mumbai. In 2004, when I used to started doing a lot of election-related programs, he introduced me to the world of business here, got me to come here and speak to different business groups on what is this election likely to be. And we have been doing it since then. Ajay, thank you for also being here. Ajay Bodke was the one who brought me here first. Thank you for that. And friends, I put my hand in the lion's den, and I'm not too sure whether I could withdraw it now. When Nilesh ji asked me to talk about the world of possibilities when you look at the 2024 elections, I suggested a topic to him that can I use a political crystal ball to look at the election. I remember, Udayji, many years ago, I was in a television program to discuss what may happen in an election, and suddenly I saw somebody next to me who I realized later was an astrologer. And he was also predicting the election along with me, and it was quite a competition that I had. I had data, he had something else on his side. And fortunately for me, at the end, I proved to be correct once the results came out. So I use the word crystal ball, but I use the word political crystal ball to discuss what I would like to talk about today. And we are doing this 18 months prior to the election. 18 months is a long time. You in Maharashtra will tell me one day is a long time for things to happen in Mumbai and in the politics of this state. So 18 months, yes. I'm looking at 2024 from the lens of where it stands today. Today it seems to be smooth sailing for those in power. But I'm not too sure if there is a storm brewing below the surface. Let's flash back to 5 years ago, November 2017. The then government, which is also the current government, the BJP government led by Mr. Modi, was riding a wave of popularity in November 2017 which it had never seen in the 3 years that it had been in power. The very next year, the summer of 2018, our first study showed the first signs of what we called waning of popularity. First time, the popularity dipped below 50%. And people started saying anti-incumbency has started, 4th year. And then February 2019, Pulwama happened, Balakot happened, and the whole picture changed. The next 3 months, the whole debate changed, and you have the government being voted back to power. So what I'm saying today, I'm taking an insurance policy for myself. So what I'm saying today is as of today. So if you meet me 2 years from now and ask me, you said this 2 years back, I'll say, yes, I said this 2 years back, but I also said 18 months is a long time to look at what could possibly happen. But let me identify what I will call 3 Bs. Battle in states, Udayji's talked about how important states are. The battle in the states, the battle in the regions, and the battle of perception. For me, these 3 battles are what I will keenly watch in the coming 18 months. So to begin with, yes, things seem to be comfortable for the current party in power at the center, but these are the 3 factors we will need to watch closely next 18 months. Since 2019 Lok Sabha election, we have had 15 state-level elections. I'm not including Himachal Pradesh in that because we don't know the result there. But 15 results that we know since 2019. What has happened in these 15 states? It's important to record the fact that in 10 of these 15, the ruling party has actually come back to power. So we are in a phase of returns of ruling party, and out of 10 of the 10 cases I talked about, 7 of the 10 involve the BJP in being able to come back to power. There are 4 cases where the ruling party has been defeated, and only one of them accounts for the BJP, and that case is Jharkhand. I don't know whether to put Maharashtra in victory or defeat. That's the 15th. Because the result said one thing and something else happened later. So, as always, Maharashtra is a separate category. So, 10 plus 4 plus 1 is where we are in terms of what has happened. And Udayji was right, states are becoming crucial. To put it rhetorically, I think to a certain extent, states are becoming the new center of politics. The center is conceding space to the states as the center of politics. And we are seeing very different results at the state level and at the national level. So having said that, if you look at the battle at the state level, the point, I think Udayji hit the nail on the head when he said, in those states where you have weak state-level leadership, it's the center which has had to push the state. Our studies show in Goa and Uttarakhand, the state governments were extremely unpopular. It required the center to push these states. Now, I think an important question which will come up in the remaining 18 months is, how much does the center push the states and maintain a momentum for 2024? I think that for me is something I'm going to crucially watch out to look at. The second B I wanted to talk about, the battle of the regions. If you go back to 2014, and if I could use a cricketing terminology, in 2014, the strike rate of the BJP in North India, West India, and Central India was extremely high. In 2019, they maintained more or less that strike rate, but added East India and Northeast India to their tally. And that's why you have that slight rise. Now the challenge in 224 would be, they are looking at the South to ensure that it is an all-India picture. But the question that a lot of people are asking today is, will the high strike rate of the North, West, and the center be retained? People are not raising the question as to whether they will get a majority of seats here or not, but whether the strike rate can be maintained here. And if the strike rate in any one of them cannot be maintained, I think the numbers in the South are not enough to compensate that. And therefore, the question as to how do you ensure that strike rate being as high as it was in these regions. And I think this is something that a lot of commentators will watch. How the BJP and its allies figures out the picture in especially North India, West India, and Central India. I remember, sir, in 2004, soon after Vajpayee ji lost the election, he made a statement in Delhi, one of his last statements before he moved back. And he said it in Hindi, so I'll say it in Hindi. He said, "Jo jeete unhe aaj bhi malum nahi wo kyon jeete. Jo haare unhe aaj tak malum nahi wo kaise haare." And some of us at Lokniti then wrote an article saying, if we looked at, and that time also India had 28 states, if you look at the 28 states of India, there was a verdict which was different in every state. Even today, you look at the 5 states of South India, each of them has a different verdict in a Lok Sabha election. And we said, at the end of the day, in fact, Udayji, we found that Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Andhra, 3 states swung 1999 to 2004. Just 3 states. If you look at the data of these 3 states and the seats won, exact shift was only because of 3 states. The point I'm raising is, for me, 224 will also be about critical states. And these critical states for me would be Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and how can you all be far behind? Maharashtra. I think these 3 critical states and their behavior in 2024 will be critical in determining the ultimate direction of that election. And let me come to my third B, and I would love to have more time for a dialogue with this audience, because I would see that as something I can take away, because I get rarely a chance to speak to audience which are linked to business. My third B is that elections have today become battles of perception. They are perception battles. I will not name people, but I remember in one election, one leader mentioning to me at the end of a discussion, he said, "Shastri ji, hum jeetenge." I said, "Sir, कैसे आप कहते हैं कि आप जीतेंगे?" लोगों को लगता है कि मेरा नियत साफ है. I ask you to look at each word. लोगों को लगता है कि मेरा नियत साफ है. Now this लगता है was a very important word or term for me. And when I dug deeper, I realized elections are often perception battles. West Bengal was a perception battle. Uttar Pradesh was a perception battle. Gujarat will be a perception battle. We did a governance study in Gujarat where we found what's the biggest issue you feel which is important in your state? 51% said inflation and price rise. 15% said unemployment. Has inflation increased? 9 out of 10 said yes, it's increased. So I immediately scratched my head and said, bad news for ruling party. Satisfaction with government, 64% said satisfied with government. Now, how do I explain this? Which means the issues that you think are important and you are worried about, when you go into that room and look at the EVM, different set of issues seem to be bothering you there. That's what I meant by, friends, the perception battle. Are we seeing the emergence of a new one-party dominant system in the country? Politics of the 70s and the politics of the 2020s seem to be following a mirror image in several ways. And my last perception question. Everybody says India's challenge or the advantage for the ruling party is the Tina factor. There is no alternative. Could be. But I don't think the question is there is no alternative. I think the advantage that the ruling government, the ruling party and its leadership has is they are thinking 4 steps ahead of their opponents. They are not thinking of what the opponent would do. They are thinking of what the opponent would do, what would we do, what would they do, and now what do we do? And that's where the advantage comes in. My final point, and this I was discussing with somebody I met here when I came in. If 2024 would really have to be a battle, it cannot be a leadership battle. Because if it's a leadership battle, the battle is already over. Others can just pack up and go if it's a leadership battle. If it's a policy alternative battle, if it's a program alternative battle, there is a battle at hand. But would the opposition be able to convert it into that? I doubt. Would the ruling party allow it to be converted into that? I doubt. The leadership focus continues on both sides. And as I said, the moment it is that, it's a battle lost even before it has begun. I would stop there, and I would be happy to respond to any questions that may be there in the audience. And again, caveat, we are talking of 30th November 2022 and not the middle of 2024. Thank you so much for giving me such a patient hearing.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful talk on forthcoming election scenario. Now the floor is open for question and answer.
Thank you for a very invigorating, insightful talk. Since you took the insurance policy before you started, My question is, what can bust that policy? So what can cause this to change between now and 2024? 1, 2, or 3 factors.
One factor which could cause the change is this growing perception that all states are not being treated as fairly. A growing perception which you see being projected in the media also and in writings also, that the leadership or the central government appears to be favoring certain states. And if this is something which is used by state leaders, and if governments are not able to project this effectively, I think there could be a challenge. Secondly, let's remember, and I'm not talking of the round of elections of which we will hear the results in a week from now. Next year, we have critical elections coming up through the year. And I think all those elections will be critical in creating a momentum as you move forward. And if those elections see in any way certain startling results, starting with my home state, Karnataka, where in the middle of the year it goes to the poll and the situation is very, very dicey there. Or at the end of the year when 3 states in the north go to polls. Now, I think, I'm not saying that they would define and decide 2024, but I'm saying they could impact on the momentum of 2024. So that's another factor which I think I would like to emphasize. A third factor, I think, is if the opposition gets its, and that's not as just a capital I, it's also a capital F. If the opposition gets its act together and is able to focus on a program and a policy-based alternative, there could be a bigger challenge which the ruling party faces. And I think in the next 1.5 years also, is there visible proof that the ruling party brings for 2 things? One, a visibly expanded bench strength at the national level in terms of who are the faces of the party. And secondly, at the state level, would the party still want to continue to do what it does with the central leadership being in the forefront, or would strong state leadership emerge within the ruling party? Because if it emerges, this is what data shows, whenever the challenger has a very charismatic face at the state level, the party has had a problem. So I think for me, these are the factors which could impact in the next 18 months as we go forward.
Shastri ji, very, very impressed. Spoken with such commitment as a true teacher, committed teacher, such eloquence and articulation. Your disclaimer, of course, noted. You mentioned, very rightly, I would think, that if it's a matter of leadership, then there is no question. I mean, ho gaya. No discussion at all. But you also mentioned earlier something about something brewing underneath. I missed that. Did you cover that later? What are the possible elements which are brewing below this otherwise very clear leadership?
I would see, one is what I've already mentioned, the emerging sense of, I wouldn't say unhappy, the emerging sense of marginal and mild unrest, that is there a discrimination or injustice to certain states, and if those are popular states, then you are likely to get a rebound and can keep people capitalize on that factor. The second is, having been in power for, by the time we go to the poll, it will be 10 years. Having been in power for 10 years, and we have seen in the past how the 10 years brings in strong anti-incumbency. Being in power for 10 years, would the BJP be able to present to the voter in 2024 a plan of action which indicates, especially to the younger voter, that there is something that I would look forward to? In 2014, our studies show that there was something like a 10 percentage point higher voting for the BJP among the less than 25 age voter. Now, and that's a growing population. So what we call this aspirational India. Now, does this aspirational India believe, and I'm using a strong term, does this aspirational India believe that we will go beyond rhetoric to actual reality? We have wonderful slogans being coined, but does that rhetoric actually on the ground translate itself into reality? And lastly, and this is something the Prime Minister himself has been saying, I will take the party forward, but are there others to actually support? That's why I refer to the bench strength. Now, does the party do enough in the next 18 months to visibly demonstrate the presence of a bench strength, especially a bench strength of younger leaders? And the challenge there is, you promote the younger leaders, those who are waiting in line would say, what about us? That's the question.
Is possible complacency also a point? 10 years?
If there's anything I would not equate with the BJP leadership is complacency. That's why I said they think 4 steps ahead of what others think.
I have just one question, Dr. Shastri. No, it's not a tough one. You rightly said that they think 4 steps ahead. How do you think, in that context, how do you relate that to what happened in Bihar?
Now, Bihar, the flip-flop that we have seen in Bihar, I would say that my own reading of the situation, the leadership of the party knew this would happen. And the leadership of the party believed that as this was happening, there is nothing that we could do to actually prevent ourselves from going out of power. And then the strategy was, how do you ensure that the new alliance that emerges does not threaten us in 2024? The speaker played a very marginal role in Bihar, even though he belonged to the BJP, when the question came as to the changeover. And a lot of us were surprised as to why did the speaker keep quiet. And my reading of the situation is, when you cannot capitalize on this situation, allow them to continue to do what they want and wait for the chance in 2024 to be able to. And you will, and I have already seen the campaign is talking about the multiple flip-flops, and do you want a leader who does that? I think what is not happening is the projection of a leader who can challenge the existing leadership. And this is where I feel West Bengal also was lost, where you tried to win the election on the central government's, central leadership's name. And that's why I said, when you have a strong, visible, charismatic, credible, state-level leader opposing you, it becomes difficult only to win on the charisma of the central leader. Because the voters say, central leader, you are already in power. I'm looking at who I want at the state level. And that's where the party faces a challenge.
Good evening. My name is Havovi Patel. My question is a very basic layperson question. Considering that both the governments that we've had historically have had their own strengths and their own ways of taking the country forward, and also considering what Mr. Uday Kotak said today about the country needing to leapfrog now, what kind of a government do we need? What kind of a leader do we need? And what are therefore their manifesto promises that we should be considering before we decide who to vote for?
That is not a layperson's question, I can assure you. I would go back to what Udayji said. This country is a country of multiplicity. I will not say contradictions. I will say this country is a country of multiplicity. This country requires multiple messages for different segments in a same time. And therefore, I think the election promises that you will see would cater to different segments. You would have the business segment's interest, you would have the working class interests, you would have the poor who depend on the state, their interests. And I think that mixing of the message to the voter is something which every party attempts to do. And I think the success, and again I say perception battle, the success lies in who is able to project that across groups. I remember in 2019, a lot of people saying the BJP promised a lot in 2014 for the business class, nothing much happened. But now that they have one full term, maybe in the next term it will happen. So let's wait for the second term to happen, you see. So, and therefore that curating of the message to different sections. I have done this. Look at the speeches that are made across states, within a state, urban, rural areas, the messages that go out. Now, they are clearly messages aimed at a particular audience. So, there is no one size fits all for political parties in India when they go for their campaign. And I think success lies in the fact that you are able to bring that message across groups. Younger group, older group, upper class, middle class, educated, not so educated. Now, how do the multiple messages resonate with various groups? I think here lies the success of a party in being able to project its message.
Hello. Dr. Rajan Raje, you said 3 states are going to be very crucial in 24, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra. The current situation in our state is complex to say the least. So what do you think is really going to transpire and what do you see happening? The other thing which you said about the charismatic local leader, I think it is absolutely true because probably, I mean, I may be wrong, but the central leadership all along has always looked at the charismatic local leaders as a threat. So that is another challenge in Maharashtra. So what is your take on that?
I would say that 2024 in Maharashtra, I'm talking of the Lok Sabha election, not the assembly election, because both are 2024. If you look at the Lok Sabha election 2024, I see 2 factors which will have to be watched in the next 18 months. First, what happens in the Mumbai municipal elections? That would be a critical boost for whoever is able to do well there. And that's where I think the competition is now increasingly focused on. And that result is going to be crucial in shaping the nature of competition which you will have in Maharashtra, and also the nature of possible alliances you will have in Maharashtra. That election you will not have that alliance during the election, the municipal election, because the current alliance partners cannot come together for that election, but after the election, what happens, I think, will be crucial. Secondly, I think, how well does the current government manage its contradictions as it moves forward? What happens in the legal battle which the state is today seeing between the Shiv Sena factions? Now, I think both these factors will be crucial in deciding how Maharashtra shapes up for 2024. And I think I would encourage all of you to look at these two factors in being able to project what is likely to happen in 2024 in this state.
Thank you, Dr. Shastri. I'm sure you'll be available with us for the dinner. So, Pritesh, can I ask you to present vote of thanks?
Thank you. Dr. Shastri, you spoke about lifelong learning. I'm sure all of us will agree in the last 90 minutes, the amount of power-packed learnings we had with both the speakers. Can we please have a round of applause for both of them? I, on behalf of Bombay Chambers, would like to express sincere thanks and gratitude to Mr. Uday Kotak, Managing Director and CEO, Kotak Mahindra Bank, and Dr. Sandeep Shastri, Vice Chancellor, Jagran, Lakecity University, for gracing us with your presence today and for your fabulous talk. It's India's time to shine, as Mr. Kotak, you called out. I think if somebody has played the cards very well, which has been dealt with entire geopolitical crisis, COVID, by managing growth, by managing inflation, and by managing currency, clearly it's India's time to shine. And I'm sure we are very well placed, and you called out the virtues of managing two P&Ls, a learning which all of us will take home from conversation today. As we'll watch 18 months down the line, the three battles, the battle of state, the battle of region, and the battle of perception, we will remember the talk that we had today from you, Dr. Shastri. I also want to thank Mr. Nilesh Bhai, our president, for his constant support and encouragement to the team, helping make this event a grand success. Let me also take this opportunity to thank all the board members, invitees, and all members of this August gathering for taking your time today from your busy schedule. I'm sure it was worth it. And thank you so much for joining us on this 187th Foundation Day of Bombay Chamber. As a chamber, we have been able to achieve a lot with many activities which have happened over the last many months and multiple impact those activities have created. All this could not have been possible without tireless work, effort, and energy, and consistent support from the Chamber Secretariat. Hence, I express my sincere thanks to Mr. Sandeep Khosla, Director General, and his team for their outstanding commitment, passion, and delivery for the Chamber. Let me thank all of you for being here today, and we have more time to ask questions and network and have some dinner together. Thank you so much. Before we wind up, there's a small token of appreciation from Bombay Chamber side.
I would like to request Mr. Shah and Mr. Tiwari to please give a memento to our honorable chief guest and guest of honor as a token of our appreciation. Thank you, Dr. Shastri. Thank you, Mr. Shah. Thank you, Mr. Tiwari. Thank you, Mr. Kotak. That's bring us to the end of the event. On behalf of Bombay Chamber, I would like to thank you all for taking time for your busy schedule to celebrate our 187th Foundation Day. May I request you all to please kindly join us for cocktails and dinner. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Good night. Have a great time.